Well, as long as you're not dressing up as the guys from Squid Game, I think you should be fine. This Halloween episode, not too surprisingly, opened at the pumpkin pineapple patches because I guess it's a tropical substitute for the winter squash. Even though I don't know of anyone in all of Hawaii who would do this, as it is a very juicy and sticky fruit when you cut into it, plus not even in season. Oh, but that wasn't the worst bit of misrepresentation in this scene. Manatsu, you know that, never mind. Anyway, after Manatsu almost pulled a Christopher Lloyd in When Good Ghouls Go Bad, did anyone remember that film? I think it's a bit of an underrated Halloween classic. Laura spotted out the obvious lesson of the week. But yeah, they were collecting all of these jack-o'-lanterns for their school's Halloween festival. And of course, everyone dressed up for the occasion, like Manatsu as a werewolf or Sango as Captain Marvelous. However, while everyone had picked out their costumes, Laura was still undecided between Praladi, Rosia, or Chucky. Yeah, I guess someone's enjoying that new show. Yeah, personally I prefer your costume from Komi-san. However, wanting to win the school's costume contest, she decided to do what most of us do and made a last-minute trip to the rental shop. This proved to be bad timing, as Numeri just so happened to discover she was Missy Ayaneda Ball, which does raise a few questions, though we'll get to that in just a bit. For now though, it of course turned out to be at the school. Ah yes, because the greatest adversary of the Precure is my yoga ball and the cheap pump it came with. Legit, I'm surprised how similar they look. But yeah, as our heroines pointed out, going by its face, it was a basic Yaneda, which is a little odd since the last one we saw was all the way back in episode 9. So how exactly did it end up in this storage warehouse, and more importantly, how did it not activate until now?
Well, you got me. By all accounts, it doesn't make sense.
And while this should have been an easy victory for our heroines, as always, they were hampered by the fact that they needed Laura to use the aqua pot. The very pot that she had conveniently left behind that Manatsu just so happened to have, and, well...
What? What? What?
Yeah, I'll also get more into this in just a bit, but first we finally got to see the return of Manatsu's finisher be severely abbreviated. Boo! Anyway, even though the monster had been defeated, the motivation energy was still stuck in the pot. Yeah, as it turned out, while the motivation could be retrieved, unless Laura was using it, it couldn't be siphoned back into their respective owners, which makes sense. This is clearly technology created by mermaids for mermaids. While certain features, like the camera, could be used by anyone, some of the fine-tuned stuff likely needed a mermaid to operate it. Honestly, I'm just kinda surprised it took them this long to establish this. I mean, I wouldn't have minded if they never brought it up, just like let it be one of those unwritten rule sort of things. I just kind of feel it a little odd to bring it up now is all. If anything, it did at least lead into consequences for Manatsu, who in a good character moment immediately acknowledged that she had screwed up. No, y'all are supposed to crash after the festivities. Pfft, bunch of lightweights. And even after Laura returned, they couldn't unleash the energy. Thus, Manatsu did the most sensible thing and tried to force it out like a pepper shaker. And it seemed to work at first, but... Well, to the creators' credit, at least they're also learning from their mistakes. Again, parts of this episode do kinda make sense, as it has been established, technically twice, that the pod can switch personalities, which would include motivations. In this case, these characters are still mostly the same person, just with their priorities skewed in an admittedly really funny scene. However, like a burst of adrenaline, it quickly wore off, meaning that I guess they'll never get that motivation back, or at least not in time for the festival. Once again realizing that she had screwed up by rushing into things, Manatsu gave herself a punishment game. Yeah, because playing around with a bunch of gag arrows really shows how repentant you are, I guess. Though she didn't have time to do the robot, as Chonge just kind of came out of nowhere and recreated that one boss from Mega Man 7. Fortunately, all Laura had to do to rejuvenate their leader was say one of her catchphrases, and that just kind of worked. Granted, she was still shell-shocked, which put her in a very vulnerable position when her friends were rather easily taken out. Yeah, maybe all of you should try not rushing into things. That said, and while this was by no means a great fight, it did lead into another good character moment for Manatsu, where she decided to heed her team's advice and let the monsters attack free them. It nicely contrasted with our earlier mistake, with them even having similar layout. Granted, the choice was pretty damn obvious, but at least it was well storyboarded, which we'll get into during the closing thoughts. Anyway, the fight just kind of ended, with our heroines not even landing a single hit on this thing other than their finisher. But oh well, they defeated it and returned the stolen motivation energy to the trick-or-treaters and Yuriko and wait, huh? How? Yuriko and the other students and teachers had their motivation stolen by a completely different monster and ultimately wasted by Manatsu, so how are they back to normal now? They can't have taken it from the trick-or-treaters because we've established that motivations can't be shared, so did they just naturally get back? Because if that's the case, it kind of undermines the threat of the antagonist.
The answer is don't think about it.
God, I didn't think I would have to use both of those clips in one review. So, Laura won the costume contest by somehow putting together a rather intricate costume in the last minute. Sorry Laura, but the only reinterpretation of the monster I'll accept is Junji Ito's memeable take. And the episode ended with the festival just kind of going smoothly, and me wishing there was more zombie Christopher Lloyd in this thing. This could have been a great episode if not for a few key factors. First of all, this really does feel like an episode that should have played a lot closer to the beginning of the series, like even before the Bear's debut. That way, they could have introduced the Aquapot's limitations as well as a significant character flaw for Manatsu. Though, even if you put all of that aside, which I could totally understand, I don't think there's much denying that they also really need to fix up some of the plot holes here. Then again, knowing who the writer this week was, I'm not too surprised that there were holes. I really don't want to have to keep picking on this one writer, but Konomi Shugo has really not been doing this season any favors. Sure, I do think it's great that Toei is trying to raise more new writers for this franchise, and to her credit, she is improving a little, as this episode did have some decent ideas. Like, even though it is a little late into the series for it, I think we're going to enter into the final arc pretty soon, it was interesting to see some of the limitations and glitches of the Aquapot. I also do like the idea of Manatsu admitting to her mistakes from recklessness. As always, I think that's a good trait for a leader, Precure or otherwise. Hell, to her credit, it wasn't even necessarily a bad call considering how often this team is hamstrung when Laura's not around. And yet, all of that is kind of undermined by this episode's massive plot holes. The major one was, of course, everyone just kind of getting their motivation back, even though half of it was wasted by Manatsu, but then there was also a lot of plot conveniences, like Numeri only now noticing that she was missing an old Yaraneda ball that somehow spent 26 episodes not activating, or Chongie just kind of coming out of nowhere instead of the villain who lost her ball. Again, I'm not trying to pick on this one writer, but this is really basic stuff that needed to be better thought out. All that said, this was also a nice looking episode, as not only was everyone's costume designs cute, but the storyboarding was also really good, with Yukio Kaizawa coming back after their excellent work on episode 31. Thus, even though the story wasn't the greatest, it at least flowed well, and we did get some excellent shots. Still, yeah, there's no getting around some of the severe writing flaws of this episode. So, overall, while I would say this wasn't a terrible episode, and really just on par for this writer, I also really hope this was her last episode. The very thought of her writing more episodes than Misamu Murayama or Mio Inoue is more upsetting than Manatsu's finisher being cut off. If you haven't seen it yet, as is so often the case with Halloween videos, we made a top 13 list of a classic anime, The Laughing Salesman. Honestly, I made it just because I wanted to, because I do think it's a series that is severely underrated, especially its revival. Not to mention, it was much easier to make than the Higurashi video I was originally planning, and probably will make one day. For now though, I'm just gonna take things a little slower, and fortunately Precure is also taking a break next week. Though do still check out my other reviews, which might include Doremi and PPGZ filling in the empty space. And until then though, farewell for now my friends, and this is Halloween candy to me.